This presentation is for informational purposes only and is not offered as legal or professional advice regarding any particular matter. No person should act on the basis of this presentation without seeking appropriate professional advice. The speaker's views expressed in this program may not be reflective of those of anyone else, including their respective firms or any of its lawyers, associates, or clients.
Welcome to Supercharged Supply Chain, a podcast that delves into the complex, complicated, and ever-changing world of getting product from a source to a destination with your hosts, Ron Liebman and Joseph Paris.
Hello, welcome to Supercharged Supply Chain. I'm Ron Liebman. With me is my co-host, Joe Paris. Joe is in Frankfurt, West Germany. I'm in Northern New Jersey. Where would you guys rather be? I think Germany. In any case, today we're going to talk about warehouse optimization. Joe has decades of expertise in this area. And I think most people know there's been a huge change in the way products are distributed. The multi-channels, one of them being e-commerce, pressures caused by customization of product that people expect or even businesses expect. And we'll talk a little bit about technologies now, technologies in the future, like 3D printing, which is kind of more in the future than now, as you'll hear. Perhaps even the days when your refrigerator will be ordering directly from the warehouse and what that means for the warehouse. And finally, as we have in everything we've discussed so far, we'll discuss people and we'll discuss automation and how they work together. Joe, throwing it over to you.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks. It's great to have this new episode with you. I think it's the first one in 2021 that we're doing. You're sort of sharing your age when you refer to Frankfurt being in West Germany. It's just Germany.
Oh my God, did I say that?
Yeah, you said that. Yeah, I thought it was funny. But borders change, and when borders change, it affects the logistics. We see that dynamics of that going on right now with Brexit, for instance.
Hey, Joe, I have to apologize to all Germans. I'm sorry. That was an age moment.
That was. I thought it was great though. But the one thing that the pandemic, and I'm sure everybody already knows this, the pandemic has precipitated out in business, is a gigantic and rapid move to warehousing, distribution centers, and e-commerce in general. That shift has been, dramatic, as not just in scale, but in speed. It's not even a year into the pandemic, and the amount of business that is done remotely is absolutely remarkable. But if we think about our warehouses, there's a lot of overhead, there's a lot of expense, there's a lot of, I'll call it friction. I don't mean friction in the way of, people not getting along kind of friction, like family friction or friction between nations, but the friction that goes on within the warehouse that slows product moving from the shelves onto the truck and on its way to the customer. So if we look at some of the challenges that are in the warehouse, how do we optimize where that product is placed? There's a lot of artificial intelligence that is, we don't want fast volume movers way back in the back of the warehouse. We want them brought up front. So we're going to be leveraging in things like artificial intelligence to place those products within the warehouse smartly, so that they could be picked very, very efficiently. I got to share a story with you. I was at a client site here in Europe, and they are an e-commerce, purely e-commerce clothing company. That's all they do, is they sell clothes over the internet. And their biggest challenge, as they're explaining it to me, was that it took an average of 4 days to get an order out onto the truck, from the time the order was taken to it being put on the truck. And I thought that was rather excessive. just based on my experience with the biggest logistics company in the world, there, Amazon. So a couple of weeks later, I'm back in the States, and I have a $50 coupon that's going to expire if I don't use it, for a company that's very similar in the States in size and offering to the company in Europe. And so I'm at my parents' house, and I log on, and it's a Sunday, and I place the order. And of course, the automatic order acknowledgement comes through pretty quick. But what surprised me was about 30 minutes later, I got another email from the company that showed the UPS tracking number, okay, for the shipment, meaning that it was already picked, boxed, labeled, and ready to go on the truck if it wasn't already on the truck. So I was like, what is the difference? What's going on that's so different between one company and the next? And the one company in Europe was heavily manual, human labor. And the company in the United States was automated and, largely automated. I mean, everything from the way the product was picked off the shelf, optimized on the shelf in the first place, but the way it was picked, the way it was packed, the way it was labeled. I mean, the human intervention involved in that process was near nil. And conversely, the company in Europe, a lot of human intervention. And I was reading just recently that the average person in America that works at Amazon is going to earn around $30,000 a year. That might be changing here in the not too distant future with respect to, minimum wage laws and, other types of influencers that might come into play. But if you think about, what we're seeing at McDonald's with automated queues, people just automatically ordering because it's cheaper to put in this automation than it is to have people, okay, doing it. I think that we're going to see a real shift and a real rapid acquisition and deployment of additional automation tools. What's your experience, Ben?
So, Jonah, I kind of have a question first. If
Yeah.
you don't mind. So,
Yeah.
in your experience, do you see people being replaced by automation, or do you see people being retrained and working alongside automation?
That's a great question. What I'm seeing is that that activity, which is rote or hazardous, is being automated. Okay, you don't need a person, for instance, to put tape on a box, right? That's very highly repetitive. That lends itself to easy automation. But I think that what you're going to see is a migration of automation, those things that are rote being automated, those things that can benefit from technology, but still need, at least in the foreseeable future, human interaction. You talk about cobots, you know what I mean, where a person is working alongside of a piece of apparatus or a piece of technology in order to augment the human being and the human being's capabilities, as well as the mechanical capabilities. It could be anything from lifting to picking to normal activities that are happening on in the warehouse.
Yeah, my experience is, and this pretty much goes across all logistics, is people are looking at every tool they can. And, for visibility, for speed, there's so many AI applications coming out nowadays to do predictive warehousing at an almost up to the minute speed, which obviously people can't do. So,
Right.
real time inventories, the ability to spread that information, and the predictability that gives you in terms of the totality of your warehouse operation. I think that, as I've said before, and as Joe knows, I've written about, the only issue I have with that is there's a difference between technology you want and technology you need. In that technology suppliers tend to oversell what they have. There's a lot of puffing. That's not to say they're not good products, but they say a lot of things, and maybe they can do those things, but in reality, most people don't need a lot of them. So the really becomes in doing this people-machine balance, or even determining what machine you want. You have to first look at your operation, what it is, what makes sense. Amazon does what it does, and it does it well. Other companies do it differently, and they do it well, but it's not a one size fits all. And I think, Joe, in Europe, particularly with the union environment in Europe, I would think it would bring a whole other criteria into this of saying, could you replicate exactly what Amazon does in the US in Europe?
Well, I mean, the labor laws in Europe are a lot different than in the States, that's for sure. For instance, I don't know that they would be able to pick and pack my box, my shipment in Europe on a Sunday, for instance, especially, in Germany. So those things have to be taken into consideration. But you talk about unions, and if companies are going to do what's in the best interest of the companies, and if the labor force becomes too expensive and can be automated, it will be automated. We just see it time and again. So there's got to be a focus or an emphasis on getting people to increase their value within the warehouse. Okay, so we got to shift the conversation for employees in the warehouse. The conversation has to shift from cost to value. Okay, so we might have fewer employees in a warehouse, but the value that they're adding is greater. Therefore, you have increased value, you have increased compensation. It's if you want to earn more, make more, I guess is as the adage goes. But within the four walls of that warehouse, I think that people don't want to put tape on a box. Who wants to put tape on a box for 8 hours a day, whatever it is? I mean, that doesn't exercise the brain, and so they're doing it for a paycheck. And eventually it will wear out those individuals. So I think it really is important for people that work within the warehouse to always look at ways and opportunities to increase their value to their organization. And the organization has an obligation to support those people in honing and improving their skills so that they are more valuable to the company.
Okay. Well, you mentioned cobots and robots, but also getting a lot of press nowadays is 3D printing.
Yeah.
Which has, come into its own, has shown the ability to actually work in a very quick scale. But is it really the short-term or near-term replacement for manufacturing?
Well, I mean, that's a little bit of a whole new ball of wax, if you will. But yeah. I don't believe that at this point. Okay, this is the at this point in time conversation. I don't think that 3D printing can keep up with volume items. Okay, I think that's where it would crumble. But if you think back, in time, well, you mentioned, West Germany. But
You're never going to let me go.
No, I'm not going to. But if you go further back in time than that, way back, regular manufacturing, with lathes and drill presses and things of that nature, those are very, very slow compared to what is today. I mean, you look at a CNC machine and what it does, it's remarkable. You put that back, 100 years, in the era of, Ford making, the Model T, and it's, like night and day. So, we're at the infancy. We're at the drill press phase of 3D printing. We're not at the CNC phase of 3D printing. So I see an opportunity, just like Amazon does print on demand for a lot of its book fulfillment. I could see a day where it's produce on demand, using 3D printing. starting off with low volume items, and then moving up to higher volume items as the production technology catches up or matures.
Okay, since I'm asking unfair questions,
Oh.
here's another one. Since you work all over the world, do you see any general differences in how perhaps regions or maybe even countries look at their warehousing futures in terms of moving towards technology, being more labor centric? Are there any general rubrics that you've seen?
Well, the basic rubric, if you will, is that the more expensive that labor is, the more automation is going to come into play. There's certain places in the world where you can get an army of people working in a warehouse for very little money. That's not the case, for instance, in Germany. I was at a black warehouse in Ludwigshafen. I think I almost said that right. BASF black warehouse, where there were absolutely zero lights inside the warehouse, and it was 100% automated. All the picks, the putaways, everything was 100%. Certainly there's some volatile materials in there, and that was one of the reasons that they did it. But this is the extreme of where we can go in distribution centers and warehouses, is complete 100% automation. But that automation has a gigantic price. Okay, it requires a lot of investment. So where I see people working, more people working further and deeper in roles and responsibilities within warehouses, there's more where the labor costs are less, and there's less where the labor costs are more.
Mm-hmm.
Simple economics, actually, is what it comes down to.
Yep. That's true. Although, it's interesting that a lot of the really good warehouse technology is coming out of the Far East, and it just shows that I think what you're saying is people will do cost-based analysis no matter what. Right. And even when you have cheap labor, it may be cheaper to have a drone flying within a warehouse doing picking. So I guess
we're gonna have to have air traffic controllers in the warehouse, I guess.
It always comes down to cost, I guess, huh?
Yeah, cost and speed. That's the flip side too. People are growing increasingly impatient. Okay, how many people send letters nowadays? For instance, when because you
rarely, but
but you still think about West Germany. So
that's
but really, I mean, you think about people becoming maybe less patient isn't the right word, but their expectations have been modified now so that they expect it quicker. And if we think about time being the enemy, okay, getting the information or getting the product from the people that have it to the people that need it as quickly and as frictionlessly as possible and as completely as possible is what people are striving for, and it offers the competitive advantage at the end of the day. So we can't have a conversation about warehouses and distribution centers without also talking about safety. And I think this is something else that is pushing the introduction of technology in the warehouse. I mean, you have these racks. Those racks have packages on them. Those packages can be heavy. They could be awkward to get to. We've seen probably on our social media feeds, the one forklift that will nudge a shelf, and next thing you know, the entire distribution center comes caving in on them. And I'm sure that there's probably some load issues and configuration issues in the shelving units, and that could be a whole different conversation. But the thing is, a warehouse is not an inherently safe place to be. It might look safe because the product doesn't move most of the time. It just sits there on the shelf, but it's fraught with peril.
Yeah, and I think I rarely talk as a lawyer in this, but as a lawyer, I've seen clients been involved in incredibly serious accidents, even deaths, where people have been hit by forklifts, things have fallen and such. So, you always have to remember that as long as we have people, you have to think of safety. But safety also takes another vein. OSHA and various state OSHAs in the United States, and I'm sure in Europe, have very specific rules to protect workers. So, for example, a consumer products client of mine, large consumer products client, has a warehouse in Southern California. They had to refigure their entire floor stocking system to allow their employees, every employee, to be within a limited distance of a fire extinguisher. They had to add fire extinguishers, and they lost about 15,000 square feet in doing so to make aisles that they historically had used for stock. So, when you're doing your warehouse planning and you're doing your quick pick lanes and all the things you do, you better take a look at what the state and federal labor laws say, because they may tell you that you can't put it where you want to do it.
Right. Or you have to put it with accommodation of some sort or another.
Yes.
We're working on one project where we're laying a bunch of fiber optic cable. This is, maybe 20 years ago. And after we laid it, they came to us and said, wherever you go through a wall, it's got to be fireproofed, so that if there's a fire, it can't go through the hole that you just created to run the cable through. And we had to get these special sleeves that were slit to feed into the holes that we created to protect the fiber optics, as well as the preventing fire from escaping one area to the next. So, people talk about safety all the time, but safety is oftentimes in conflict with speed. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, it really comes down to the question: is safety first, or is it not first? And if your corporate culture is such that it's not first, there's probably some government agency that's going to correct you.
I would say safety has to be first. I mean, you can balance it, but I would say protecting our people is the most important thing, because, let's put this in the monetary sense, forget the people sense. People are an asset.
Yeah.
And people getting hurt is a cost. But just beyond that, particularly in this world now, the social benefit outweighs everything else.
Yeah. The challenge, though, of course, Ron, is that people have a tendency to do some stupid things. I mean, let's just say, we've seen it. We've seen the videos of people in warehouses, people misusing tools, people misusing forklifts and whatever. They're not actually being told by their bosses, and it's not corporate policy to do this. They just do it because they think it's funny, and it's all fun and games until somebody loses an eye, right? It's so when we think about safety, we have to think, I believe, as a culture of safety. And safety only comes first if it's down to the individual.
Mm-hmm. I think. Yeah. Good point.
So, well, listen, Ron, I think that's good enough for today's conversation about warehouses and distribution centers. What do you think?
I think we've hit on all of it.
Good. So, on behalf of Ron and myself, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Supercharged Supply Chain. Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to another edition of Supercharged Supply Chain with your hosts, Ron Liebman and Joseph Paris.
This presentation is for informational purposes only and is not offered as legal or professional advice regarding any particular matter. No person should act on the basis of this presentation without seeking appropriate professional advice. The speaker's views expressed in this program may not be reflective of those of anyone else, including their respective firms or any of its lawyers, associates, or clients.